Hey everyone, Mark, Megan, and Brett here. The iconic Madison Square Garden is behind us. The UFC 281 press conference just wrapped up, and guys, did you think it was exciting, Brett?
I think the fight card is going to be exciting. I'm very excited for the fight card.
Yes.
The press conference was not exciting at all, and I think we kind of knew that going in. I know that Dustin and Chandler had like their little run-in, but they're nice guys. And like there is no real beef here. Like the beef is the beef in every single fight, and this is competition. You're trying to take something from me, I'm taking something from you. So to like try to work it up into something that it's not was just never gonna work with those guys because they're not fake. You know, right. like that's why we like them. So I didn't think that there was gonna be any fireworks between them. And then in the main event should have fireworks. Like this is legitimately a great story. Like the history there, and that Izzy went to Brazil and that Alex knocked him out, and when you rewatch that fight, he's screaming in his face as he's unconscious. Like this should be great. And for whatever reason, these two are just kind of downplaying it. Like Izzy has built it up like recently when he started doing media. You know, he's kind of almost taking this dark undertone of like I really want to hurt this guy. It's personal, et cetera, et cetera. But Pereira has just made really nothing of it. So I think that there was like a lost opportunity to promote, but the fights are going to be great. So
it's a little hard
it is what it is.
Right? Because, Adesanya can say whatever he wants at the press conference, but really he's talking to the translator, Fabiano. And then Fabiano has to translate it into Portuguese. And then Pereira translates, then says whatever he has to say in Portuguese, and then it gets translated again. It's not a great dynamic for trash talk, press conference, promotion. Yeah. So a lot of it was lost. The intensity that does exist between those two guys kind of gets lost in the
If I'm Alex, though, I am learning one phrase in English, and I'm making it a money phrase, and I'm going to look right into the camera when I say it. I'm like this dude, I knocked him out. That's the Dagestan.
Like I'll smash you.
Living,
that's what you got to say.
I am living in his head. He knows he got You can learn that amount of English. Right. Like it's just a lost opportunity. And it's sad to see because I want this fight to sell well. I want them to make money on it. All of that. 100%. It's like raising your profile, but it is what it is. They just chose not to do it.
But when it comes down to this main event with Izzy and Alex, are you sensing that Izzy is in a different place maybe in terms of how he's responding to things, how he's reacting to things, like Brett said, how he's maybe sort of taking a step back from promoting the fight, which he has every right to do. But do you sense he's a little bit different this week?
I think so, and I think that's what he needs to be because there's familiarity there. And he has knocked out Israel Adesanya, which no one has ever been able to do. And he's had a lot of fights over kickboxing, boxing, MMA. No one has knocked him out except for this guy, Alex Pereira. Secondly, this is a guy that knows kickboxing very well. In almost every one of Israel Adesanya's MMA fights, he has a distinct advantage in the striking. He will not have that on Saturday night. Maybe his MMA striking is better, but Alex Pereira was actually a more decorated kickboxer than he was. He's going to check Izzy's leg kicks. He's going to know the movements. He's going to understand the feints and the angles better than most of Adesanya's MMA opponents. So I do think that Adesanya is cognizant of all of those things, and that's why maybe he's a little bit more subdued this week.
But I pose this to both of you. We're talking mixed martial arts now, and we see other athletes come in and they're dominant in their sport or whatever, and they say, okay, well, it's not wrestling or it's not kickboxing, it's not boxing, it's MMA. Does that necessarily matter here? Or are we going to see for 25 minutes that it's scheduled primarily a kickboxing match?
Yeah, I mean, some people I've talked to have brought up a very solid point, and that is that this will be a kickboxing fight. However, it will be with smaller gloves, and that Israel is more used to that.
Sure.
And that he would have an advantage in that regard. I do. I think it will basically play out as a kickboxing fight. So that's about it to me. Like yes, normally that is true. Like you what you did in another sport doesn't really matter, but when you have two kickboxers, like they're going to go out and kickbox. Let's be honest, they're going to go out and kickbox.
I do think there's a chance. I mean, Adesanya has a lot more experience in MMA and a lot more experience training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling than Pereira does. Yeah. Is there a chance that maybe he does something
like a Francis Ngannou?
Where
he takes him down?
Yeah, and Ngannou had the surprise of it. Could be a key factor. Who knows?
I'll say this one thing about Izzy too is that he's just so smart, right? We talk about how he's very, very intelligent, and like a lot of things that he says, come to fruition. When I listen to him talk, and maybe I'm making this up, you guys can tell me if you agree with it, but when he talks about like this is going to be a horror movie and I'm prepared, like this is going to be one of those where I get hit, he gets hit, like he's almost kind of putting it out there like this is going to be my toughest fight. And if he thinks this is his toughest fight, then I believe him. Like I think this will be his toughest fight.
Yeah, and he's being honest about that.
Yeah.
Right, and he's always been like that, right? He said, "I'm prepared to die." We all saw that quote inside the octagon when he's facing Kelvin Gastelum. So I think obviously time will tell if this goes all 5 rounds, which we see scheduled, but we never know if it's going to see that. But also scheduled for 5 rounds is this co-main event.
Yes.
This is a really interesting one because Carla Esparza comes out today. She has the belt, obviously not the performance she wanted in her last fight. Man, the crowd was not on her side today.
Yeah.
Were you surprised, Mark? Because I certainly was.
Okay, so I tweeted that I was surprised about the boos that it was like an overpowering boos that Esparza was getting, and all of my replies to my tweet are, why are you surprised? That fight against Namajunas was horrible earlier in the year. That's fine. But when someone is up there in New York City and says, I want to keep the belt to the United States of America, and they boo her, that was shocking to me, that they would boo someone saying, I want to keep the title in America. Yeah. That was shocking. Okay, Grant, she had a bad fight. Wow, okay, big deal. But the fans are really holding it against her that much? I mean, that seems to me a little overboard. Very, very surprising to me.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. I was surprised about. I was surprised about the booing, especially the part when she's talking about the bringing it, keeping it in the United States. The only thing I would say is that I think MMA fans get mad when they think that someone has something that they didn't deserve, and I think that they just look at her and they're like, "You're not a champion. You're not a champion." You know, I think maybe that has something to do with it.
There were 2 fighters in
that fight.
Of
course, it's not her fault,
course,
but they just. You've seen that with like a great fight that could go either way. They immediately boo whoever it's going to go to. Like it's just one of those things.
Fickle.
You know?
Can she flip the script? Can Carla flip the script?
Oh yeah, she can flip the script if she goes out and beats Weili, because then people will be like, oh, she's the champion. Yeah, she's coming in as what, like a plus 300 underdog or something like that. So yeah, she's got an opportunity to legitimize it here for sure.
Do you expect to see Carla retain the title?
It's so hard to say. I mean, we've seen Carla has the one thing that a lot of people on division do not have, and it's really dominant wrestling. And if she can utilize that wrestling and her grappling and keep Weili down, obviously that's a huge factor in her favor. But that's a big if, because I mean, Zhang Weili is out here picking up Francis Ngannou at the PI and like carrying him on her shoulder. Yeah. I mean, she's incredibly strong. You know, she also has good wrestling, good grappling. It's going to be a really hard fight.
Of course.
For Carla Esparza.
Of course.
A really hard fight.
I mean, the question you asked is, do you expect her to keep it? No, I don't. She's a big underdog for a reason. Yes. I mean, Zhang Weili is legitimately amazing. She's awesome. She has more firepower. Carla's got to be perfect for 25 minutes. But if I'm being honest, I didn't expect Carla Esparza to win some of the other fights that she has leading up to this. I didn't expect her to win a championship. A lot of people didn't expect her to beat Rose, and I know it was a very weird fight, but she did still win. So, but no, like the expectations are against her this weekend.
Yeah. Sure. All right, quickly, I want to get to these last 3 fights on the main card. Okay. Obviously, we talked about very, very much off the top between Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier. They're 2 professionals. We saw them have a little bit of heat. I think they might have a heated face-off at the weigh-ins.
Yeah.
But in terms of your expectations for this fight, I mean, Dustin Poirier said you can expect a car crash and he better wrestle. Do you think that we're going to see a Chandler that wants to wrestle, or Chandler that goes out there and lays it all on the line because it's MSG?
Well, I think that's always hard to answer because he's instinctual. Like he's a great fighter for a reason. Like he's not like, if he sees an opening, he's just going to do it without thinking about it, you know? But I tend to look at this fight, and as everybody else, that it's going to be an action fight, and if I'm putting myself in their minds, I don't think I don't want to waste any energy in wasted takedown attempts, like because they are both good wrestlers, right? I mean, Chandler's got more of the chops, but Dustin has shown great wrestling. And do you really want to take a risk where you might slow yourself down, or like this is a fight where you need to be sharp and you need to be quick, you know? So I just don't think they're going to wrestle. I think that both of them are going to look for the knockout. I really do. It's that type of fight.
I mean, obviously, Chandler wants to have another Fight of the Year candidate here in this arena. I mean, he spoke about that. But Mark, Frankie Edgar.
I'm so glad you asked me about Frankie Edgar, man.
Yeah, you're an East Coast guy. I got to.
Yeah, this is a layup for me.
The most shady, Frankie baby. I am so curious. We know how the crowd is going to respond.
Yeah.
I mean, man, did they give him love today? So well deserved.
Yeah.
But in terms of his performance, what do you think about him in this matchup with Chris?
I mean, look, it's not going to be an easy fight, and you mentioned that the crowd is going to be on his favor, and I think that for a lot of us, and I think you guys know that I try to remain a neutral observer of this sport and completely objective, but I gotta say, like, I'm not sure if I'm even standing here right now if not for Frankie Edgar. I mean, he was when I was a fan, Frankie Edgar was my guy. I was a Frankie Edgar stan. You know, as a guy who grew up in New York, Italian American family, Edgar's from Jersey, Italian American family. I related to him. We're also not the tallest guys in the world. I'm not sure if you noticed. You know, Frankie and I are probably about the same height. So I see this guy who's like my height, beating up 55ers, Gray Maynard, and he was my favorite fighter at that time. So part of me on Saturday night is going to be, marking out a little bit that I'm in the Garden watching Frankie's final fight.
Yeah.
I hope it goes well. I hope everyone stays healthy. I don't want to say that I'm rooting for anyone, but I think you all know probably where my heart is going to be in 48 hours.
Yeah.
Listen, you can root for somebody. My husband's off camera right now. You think I wasn't rooting for him every single fight, so we're not even going to say that.
Well, I'm not sure if Frankie, Edgar, and I are ever going to get married, but Frankie,
who knows? It
if you're out
like
there,
you might have a man crush. So I'm in full support. All right, guys, before we wrap it up, Dan Hooker, what a pop he got today. The City Kickboxing team, the entire team is being shown so much love. Kai Franz walked to his seat.
They have a lot of freaking people
walked
here.
to his seat. But that was not surprising because he certainly deserves that. But they're opening this card. They're part of the press conference, which we don't always see. And it was just so cool to hear the crowd continuously yell their support for Dan Hooker.
Yeah, well, that's one reason why people like mixed martial arts in general is because you feel a connection to fighters that you don't feel to baseball players and basketball players, and football players, because of the way that they talk and they give real talks. You understand what Dan's been through, and he's given some great interviews leading up to this fight, just talking about like how can I be like a fighter's supposed to feel indestructible, a fighter's supposed to feel like the baddest man on the planet, and I've gone out and gotten finished in 2 minutes in my last 2 fights. Like I have to address it. I have to. And so you just become linked and connected to a guy like that who's able to like, kind of put those into words. So this is a big fight for Dan, man. This is a big fight for Dan, and I don't think anyone is rooting against Claudio Puelles, but I think a lot of people are rooting for Dan Hooker to like, hey, dude, even if you lose, we would love to see a great performance on Saturday.
No, absolutely. You two are just the greatest colleagues ever. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. And I have to say, although maybe they didn't have a ton of words on stage, this UFC 281 card is going to be absolutely bananas. Don't forget, you can only watch on ESPN Plus on Saturday Night Live from the world's most famous arena.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.